and getting into conversations that we need to have. It was a heavy one that we had just the last hour, just to imagine the horrors, that are going on, and the questions that we are asking in terms of why is this all not coming to an end. Nobody deserves this. Nobody deserves to be disappeared. Nobody deserves to turn up dead for no reason.
And it's dangerous when we get to a place where the country's unmoved and those in leadership are unmoved by the horrific stories and the details that you hear of what the families are going through. It's a very sad state of affairs.
It is. And I guess that is what pushes us into the character of the next conversation that we have this morning. And joining us in the hot seats of the Situation Room this morning, Nora Mbagathi is the Executive Director of the Katiba Institute. And Nelius Njuguna is a legal advisor with the Kenyan Human Rights Commission. And both of them are here this morning. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Fine.
Yes?
Just cold.
Okay.
Yes.
Cold physically, but not inside your heart.
Not inside my heart.
There we would have been a bit worried. Cold, we can put on a jacket or something, but the other one maybe needs a little bit more attention, right? But we're glad that we can have this conversation this morning. And what is it about? We're looking at a legal challenge that's been brought up. More or less a petition, and you explain all of those details to us today. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, let's welcome you to Kenya's biggest conversation with today's proverb. Aseto will tell you where it is from, and he'd like you, I think, to interpret it for us. Yeah. Yes? Okay.
We started with saying it's cold, but early in the morning, Mr. Sentimental told us that the heart is the switch to light. Hey. Gotta love it. Our proverb today is all about love, right? Mm-hmm. And it's coming from a country in the East Africa region. We're talking about Burundi, to be specific. So what is it about Burundians? Burundi is known pretty much for its agriculture. They have very rich soil. They have one of the greatest coffees in the world, if you did not know. And although Kenyans will say ours is the best, but yeah, they have one of the best. But when you talk about their culture and tradition, if you've ever attended any Burundian culture night, these guys with big drums and they play them and whatnot. So that is actually listed in UNESCO World Heritage as one of the global initiatives to preserving culture. But let's go to the proverb, shall we?
Yes.
All right. The proverb: where there's love, there is no darkness.
That's a nice one.
How would you interpret it?
Where there's love, there's no darkness. I think, it highlights that when we have love in our lives, we have something to keep us going. We have something that can help us through tough times. I think it's a very relevant quote right now. And yeah, it's a beautiful one, I think.
How would you interpret it?
How I interpret it is love is a superpower. Love keeps us going. Love is the biggest thing we can have. It makes everything warm and just everything is better when there's love.
Sindel?
Yes.
I agree. Yeah, I was going to go away for a minute there, but okay. It would be. And I thought we actually, a couple of weeks ago, we were just here and that song came to my mind, and it was just a little bit better that if there was, love in our hearts, if we actually did one to the other, operate with that, then probably a lot of the things that we see today, we wouldn't see. And unfortunately, a lot of things that we see today have then led us to the conversation that we're having this morning. So Nora and Nelius, oh, look at that. Both of your names start with N. As we have this conversation, there has been a petition that has put forward. It's a legal challenge against the Interior Cabinet's fitness for office, and which we are speaking about at this point. And first of all, just give us an insight into what this is all about, and then we can, go into that conversation. There's a legal challenge against his fitness for office, and that's quite specific. What's that about? Let's start with you, Nora.
Yes, I think so. The petition really revolves around the remarks that he made regarding the use of force of police, saying that anyone who approached a police station should be shot, and essentially, even when walking it back, citing laws that related to the protection of property in the relation to the use of force. And so the petition challenges these remarks for being inflammatory, for inflammation to violence, but also inflammation to unlawful acts. I think it really revolves around fitness for office because you cannot be encouraging police to take unlawful action. You cannot be in that role. You know, it's a real responsibility having that kind of role, and you cannot in that role go ahead and say, you know, just shoot people. You have to be abiding by the laws, and you have to be using the laws as they are current. And so the petition really challenges that. It really comes down to he has acted outside the scope of how he should be acting, what his duty is, and it's not responsible. So we at Katiba Institute, Kenya Human Rights Commission, Independent Medical Legal Unit, and a number of other groups that are part of the Police Reform Working Group have gone to court over that.
Nelius?
Yes, what I'll just add from Nora, she has given a very good background of the petition, is that the Cabinet Secretary Murkomen took an oath of office that he would uphold the Constitution. And part of the Constitution is that at the Bill of Rights, Chapter 4, the first right is the right to life. That is one right that is the most important right to enjoy all the other rights. And therefore, if a Cabinet Secretary can take it so lightly that he would order people to the police officers to shoot to kill, those remarks do not uphold his obligation to uphold the Constitution. And therefore, that's why, as the organization under the Police Reform Working Group, we went to court, because he is not upholding the Constitution and his obligation as a public officer under the Constitution to respect human rights and to respect the Constitution.
Okay, so one would ask, is it him? Because we hear the remarks that he made, but we also heard very clearly from him that hii ni amri kutoka juu. He said those words. So if this petition were to go through, let's operate in a situation whereby this petition was heard, different judicial actors were to come into play, constitutional lawyers, at some point the judiciary then being involved in all of this, and let's say, yes, with recommendations, he was removed. Let's say, would it make a difference if what he said is that this is something that's coming from the top? Anybody else could come into that position and still be carrying out orders that come from the top, no?
Yes, definitely. And I think we would be seeking accountability if that happened again. I think it you know, of course, it's not just him. We are looking at a system where we are seeing consistent violations of court orders. We're seeing consistent violations of the Constitution and of what our lawful order is at the moment. I mean, a recent example is the fact that we still see plainclothes police officers policing our protests when there are clear directives that should not be the case. But it is important to have accountability when that happens and each time that happens. And again, I think in his role, there is another enhanced responsibility that he has when making such remarks. And so if someone else were to come after him who would make similar remarks, I think we would want to see them held accountable as well. It is not going after him as a person. It is not going after him, his function, or him, you know, for what he stands for, but rather it's really the accountability for inflammatory and insightful remarks in this context.
Well, there's the statement also in part calls Murkomen to publicly retract his statements. But the underlying issue here is the fear that his remarks, even with this going to court, that these remarks will actually trigger a spike in extrajudicial killings. Is that a real concern?
That is a real concern, because this is someone who is in power. He's the Cabinet Secretary for Ministry of Interior. So this is someone who has the power and, in a way, oversight over the police officers. And if he's the one telling them, shoot to kill, that means that as a police officer standing where I am, and if I were a police officer and I've been told that to shoot to kill and that I'm protected, that the government will protect me, I will be more inclined to be trigger happy and execute those orders. And from where we stand is now that trigger happiness of trying to now to execute those orders to shoot to kill is now what will lead to an increase in extrajudicial killing without accountability, because in a way it will be, they won't be following the law, because the use of firearms is restricted, very restricted to just protection of life. So if anytime as a police officer, I've been told to shoot to kill, I will just, without thinking that I'm protecting life, I'll just do it because I've been empowered and I've been given the order to execute these.
Does the context within which he was speaking matter?
Yes.
Okay. That's very spirited.
Yes.
Why?
Well, it matters again because of where he was speaking, whom he was speaking to, what he was doing when he was speaking in that way. Right. He was speaking in the constituency. He was speaking to people there. This was not a conversation that we happened to overhear at the bar where he was talking to a friend expressing an opinion. He was carrying out his official duties. He was carrying out his role. So that is really relevant here. And I think, in his role, he knows or ought to know what the law around the use of force is. And so there, again, has been a clear judgment saying that property, the protection of property, cannot be one of those instances where you can use force in that way. And so he knows that, or if he doesn't know that, then again, that is a question whether he is really suited to his office. And so then going forward in the position that he has, in the role, carrying out the role that he has, and then making those remarks, it's so problematic and dangerous.
Okay, allow me to just Dennis, just a little bit further. That there was a clarification then that was made by himself that he was talking about when people will then try to break into an armory and take weapons and then try to use them for whatever purposes. He then came later to clarify, leave alone the fact that he said, mtu akitembe nje ya police station, he came back later to clarify that should we allow people to walk into an armory and cart away ammunition? He gave that clarification. Again, does it matter that he did that?
The clarification in this context does not matter because the first thing he said, as you have said, is when you see anyone approaching the police station, shoot to kill. So that was his first statement. He didn't say that these people are coming to
raid the
armory. He said anyone approaching. So this other context that he's trying to explain is neither here nor there. And in any event, to my knowledge, I've not had people who have gone to the armory to take the guns, and I've not had any. So there's no justification at all. And in that event, even though someone is trying to raid the armory, the first thing to do is to use less lethal ways to contain this person. Why not arrest them or handcuff them or de-escalate the situation and contain them in a way that you don't have to use firearm or shoot someone to kill them? So his comments, they're neither here nor there. Already he said what he said, and he escalated the situation, and he's causing a lot of confusion around this issue. And that's why we are seeking him to clearly apologize and say when can this force, where can these firearms be used? Because under the law, they can only be used to protect life. And that's when there are no other less lethal ways, or like what we under law, it's necessity and proportionality. When it's a necessary way to contain, to protect life, and there is no other less lethal way or less forceful ways to protect this life.
So we've talked about the use of firearms to protect life, right? There is also the use of proportionate force when dealing with such issues. But when we hear the statements that were made by the Cabinet Secretary, there is an apparent silence from other bodies that would have stepped in to ensure that, first of all, the statement was retracted, or that he made clear what it is he said. But you find, say, NCIC, silent. Talk about EACC on ethics, silent. The President, you did a good job. What message is this being sent?
I mean, I can't speak to why those bodies are silent, right, or what is creating that silence around it. But I think part of why we filed this petition was because there is that need for accountability, and you can't just have people making these kinds of comments without there being a response and a clarification at the same level. I think that's why we asked for this very public retraction and clarification on what the law is, because that's the other thing, is once that is out there and it goes viral, it spreads, it creates confusion about what actually is the situation, and so whoever is coming in on it or not coming in on it. The really important piece here, again, is that he clarifies this was wrong and this is in fact what I know the law to be, and that is done at the same volume as the other statements were made.
If you look at, sorry Dennis, the reason why I'm bringing in these bodies because these would be the oversight bodies that would have stepped in before even the civil society moved in to ensure that he is put in check, which then brings the conversation in terms of the entire government working together to ensure that justice is served to the citizenry. Is it, from where you sit, is it a communication from government that let's stay silent, hence the reason why you're moving in to demand that justice is served? Yes.
Yes. From where I stand, I don't know why the constitutional bodies and the government bodies that are mandated to carry out these roles are silent. But there is a spirit of state capture of public bodies and government bodies because what happens is when these bodies even speak out, their budget is slashed. They don't even have maybe the resources to even carry out their mandate, and also maybe some of them are afraid of the repercussions because, as we have seen with this current regime, there's been a lot of anytime anyone tries to do something, the government fights back and tries to silence that person and intimidates them. But that's just speculation. I can't say for sure what it could be, but they should be the ones actually performing these roles. They have been given that constitutional mandate and the legal mandate to keep these checks and balances against the government.
So Nora, two arguments here. Murkomen needs to leave office because he's unfit. The other argument, he needs to issue a public statement or public retraction of that statement. Looking at the current state of affairs in this country, why is a public retraction in this case from Murkomen considered necessary? And part B of that question will be, a forced retraction, will it reverse the damage or the sentiment that is already issued, or the influence of such a statement to the same people he was addressing, who are the police officers? Why is it necessary?
Or preclude it from happening in the future.
Exactly.
So I don't think we can fully undo the damage, right? The words are out there. As mentioned, we worry that it will create the spike in extrajudicial killings. So no, I don't think it can be fixed fully. I also don't think it can prevent it from ever happening again, right? We already said it might well be that someone else steps into that role and issues similar statements. But the reason it's important anyway to issue the statement and to come forward and clarify it, again, is because currently he has put out there unlawful statements. He has put out there directives that would be wrong in law, and so it needs to come from him in an era where we are looking at a lot of people talking about disinformation. We're looking at people saying about, oh, he said this, that person said that. You know, there's all these allegations basically about who's communicating what. The person who made the wrongful remarks needs to come forward and say, this was wrong.
What if
I
he
was
doesn't
wrong.
feel that
wrong
it was
is
wrong?
He was wrong. The law states he was wrong.
We're operating in a space where the law is a suggestion for a lot of people at the moment. Because if it was different, we would see very many different things happening. We would see, for example, that if court orders were given, people would adhere to them. We would see, for example, that if the law states that you should not just raise your weapon to kill somebody, we would see that that would be adhered to. If people were following the law, we would see that people would be able to assemble for protest and demonstration and be protected by the security agencies. We would see that if people were listening or obeying or adhering to the law, right? But in this case, I'm asking, we are here and there is a demand for an apology, there is a demand for retraction, there is a demand for the display of knowledge. But what if he actually doesn't feel that what he said was wrong?
So there's two things. I think, one, I hope that we're not yet at a stage where the law is in fact just a suggestion. I am equally concerned about seeing the blatant violation of court orders, the blatant, ignoring of what is the Constitution, what is the law. But we do have systems in place. We do have courts. We do have bodies that are tasked with oversight. We are not a failed state. We have structures that are there for accountability. We are able to go to court and seek accountability for what he has said. So it's what, in fact, makes a case like this so important, because we need to show that as a country, we aren't actually just operating with laws being mere suggestions. The laws are there. And if that is the case, then, in fact, it does also not matter how he feels about his statement, but rather what matters is the relevance in law. He has made unlawful remarks. If the court orders him to retract them, then he must retract them. It is not about whether he feels that he was justified in saying that or not. He wasn't.
In just a public manner, as he did when he was making the initial statement?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I want us to take a break, but I know you have a question. Go with it, Dennis.
So far, it doesn't seem that he's ready to actually give that apology or even retract, because he's made at least 5 more statements after that incident from State House when the president was there, saying that they fully support and are behind the police officers, and he's made several other statements. My question then is, if the court finds Murkomen unfit to hold office, what then are the immediate legal or political actions that could follow? Are you going then to now push for an impeachment, criminal charges? What then happens after?
There is a lot that can happen, because, as you have said, he keeps trying to make more statements. It's like he's trying to sanitize his statements from where I stand, in the sense that he knows that this has caused a lot of uproar, and people are scared that anytime you approach a police officer, the first thing they'll do is shoot you. And if the court was to find him find that he needs to retract these statements and he's not fit to hold office, the legal avenues that could be taken is there could be, in my opinion, we would even recommend criminal responsibility, because in this sense, what has been happening is the people who are ordered are the ones who they are scapegoated. They are the ones who are taken to court, like we saw in the case of Albert Ojwang. But the person giving these orders and instructions, they go scot-free. Maybe it's time that even these people in power, those people who are commanding these people, should be taken to court and are held criminally responsible for any actions that the police officers will conduct in adherence to their orders. And we can follow even the only issue with impeachment is that this is someone who is appointed by the president. So because he's appointed, but we could make a case for him to be removed in office and him to resign. That is something we could explore.
Okay, and we're looking at all of this being based on the remarks that he made. Interestingly enough, that he said them and repeated them twice, and then retracted them after the public uproar, of course, that we heard from this. And even as we look at this a little bit, is it a one-time mistake? Because look at the things that we have been seeing that have been happening, whether it's murder in a cell, whether it's shooting at point-blank range, whether it's walking alongside goons, whether it's behaving in a certain manner, whether it's disappearances of people or extrajudicial killings. All of these fall at the doorstep of the police. Is it the zeitgeist currently? Is that where we are? Because it seems as though it would give rise to many a petition like this.
And it does. And I think it has given rise to many a petition like this. I think we are witnessing a culture of impunity at the moment. And we are, much like you said, witnessing a time where there are flagrant violations of court orders, and we're seeing extrajudicial killings, we're seeing enforced disappearances, and we are not seeing the accountability that we should be seeing for that. So that is a problem. I don't know that I would call it a zeitgeist. Again, I think it's really an important time for us to secure our rights and ensure our constitution does continue living and breathing the way it was designed and the way we as the people wanted it to be. And to that end, I think it is important to call for accountability through these ways and through other ways that civil society and people taking to the streets and people exercising their offices in oversight positions are doing so. But yeah, it's a problematic and scary time.
We're looking at several politicians who, before Wednesday and even after, I'll give an example of the Tiati MP William Kamket, who before said is going to lead Pokots, or 500 of them to come to the city. And in very many words, what he was saying is, if the protesters thought that the beating that they received was something, then wait until Wednesday. So there is a clear pattern that, and Standard exposed that the goons were going to be sent to the streets. These people are paid, they are financed by someone, and they are actors, some who actually are in the state, who have spoken these things publicly, politicians who are sort of trying to protect this space, have said these things. The Nairobi governor has been mentioned in this. In your petition, beyond Murkomen, are you looking then to follow up on a lot of these cases, because all these are still incitements, they're still statements that are against the Constitution and against the law, Nora?
So his statement was particularly problematic, but I think one should not read our petition to say we are going after him and therefore no one else should be held accountable, therefore no one else has a problem. A petition on one issue, one person, does not mean the rest of the world is glory and sunshine, right? So the reason why this petition was filed and why it was particularly important, again, was the order to take unlawful action, knowing it had been held to be unlawful, and directing police officers in that way, and again doing so while exercising his functions under his office. So a number of pieces came together there that led us to go to court on this. But again, I think it's really important to note that this does not mean that everyone else is just in the clear and no one else, it's not problematic what anyone else is saying.
So we go to the court and say the court gives an order that your pleadings to the court are granted. But then again, we live in a country where court orders have just not been respected. Starting from the very same institution, that is the police. We know of the deputy IG who was summoned 7 times and appeared on the 7th time. As we go to the court and say these court orders are not respected and followed up, what's the way forward? What will be the next course of action?
The next course of action, if someone does not obey court orders, the first thing is usually to get the court to hold them in contempt of court. And if that still does not work, it's now using advocacy and political ways to get this person to obey court orders.
Political ways by whom? The politicians?
Yeah, unfortunately, the parliament, which is supposed to be a check and balance of the executive, has also been captured by the state. Mm-hmm. So they're the ones who are supposed to impeach this person, but they have been captured by the state. But applying enough pressure, we saw from last year's Gen Z protests on 25th, enough pressure can push at least some changes, in the sense of after the last protest, cabinet secretaries were dismissed, although some of them were still brought back. Mm-hmm. But enough pressure to the point that we see if these court orders will be obeyed. Mm. Yes, but that's
so.
Yes.
Nora, in any developed democracy, statements by Murkomen would have warranted him to just resign from the word go, but that is not the case here. We have to push through the courts, through all the other agencies to ensure that he walks out, which asks the question, is there willingness to just operate by the law?
Well, I think currently we are seeing a lacking willingness to operate by the law. Again, we're seeing violations of a number of court orders or lacking implementation of court orders as well, right? We're supposed to have county policing authorities. We're supposed to, we're supposed to see a number of things that we aren't seeing, especially when it comes to the area of policing, when it comes to the area of freedom of expression, and so it is a problem. But I think there's two pieces that are relevant here. One, again, is that we haven't yet reached a stage where these systems have completely broken down. The systems exist and they do function. So it is important that we use them as well. And I think the second one is, and I think, the great lawyer, Nora, he said that we do things for the record as well. It is important to put on the record that you cannot, in that position, go ahead and make such inflammatory and insightful statements ordering unlawful action, that just is not possible. The issue about lacking implementation, the issue about ignoring of court orders is its own separate problem that we have to address, and that I think we, as civil society, as member of the Police Reform Working Group, as citizens and people in this country, it is something that we're thinking about and it is something that we're working on. But to me, it's two separate issues, and we must look at them as two separate issues as well.
Trying to piece things together so that, we have a conversation whereby we're saying, okay, which direction are we going? And I keep making reference to Supreme Court Judge Isaac Lenaola when he spoke to us once, and he said, when they do make judgments or they take into consideration decisions, that they take into consideration the atmosphere in the area. It's not just you and your paper and in your space, but that they take into consideration the things that are happening in the environment. Okay, so park that. And then we've seen comments where people are saying, you know what, Kenya's not doing all that badly, guys. Make a comparison between Kenya and other nations which, using your words, can actually be deemed as failed states, where governance now truly is a suggestion, whereby there's no order. So for you to even say the adherence to the rule of law, it doesn't happen. That either as a result of conflict or dissidence, that there is no functioning operation of government. So why do you want to ruin the thing that Kenya has working so well? For all intents and purposes, Kenya's operating well. So, taking into consideration the environment, you know what? The man made a mistake, maybe. He said something but we're okay. So, why do we want to, stoke the fire? Just let things, we'll be okay. No?
Is that all we're worth to ourselves? Is that as... This is as good as it gets. Let's just go with it. Yes, but is that the standard we want to hold ourselves to? Are we really comfortable saying, well, it could be worse, so let's just go ahead and live with it? Personally, no, I don't think that is the standard we want to hold ourselves to. We yes, are in a better position than some. We are in a worse position than some. I don't actually think that necessarily comparing in that way is the way we want to go. We want to look at our systems. We want to look at our constitution. We have our own constitution. It was a big struggle to get there. It was a struggle to get from pre-colonial times to post-colonial times to the new constitution to where we are now. We can't just watch that be dismantled. That is just not good enough.
I mean, Nelius, let's talk about systemic failures or institutional gaps or bottlenecks when we come to these kind of petitions. The feeling would be, in this particular case, is, well, this is not going anywhere. We don't have a precedent where a court actually made a ruling and a cabinet secretary or minister or a high-ranking government official resigned, or they were actually ousted from office or declared unfit. We don't have, I don't know whether we have any case like that. I stand to be corrected. You look at today's standard, Abductors Playground. The DCI is supposed to come to court today to produce this young man who was abducted in the Angui Kinyagya. And He didn't. The first time it was mentioned, he didn't. Now he's supposed to come in today. We're not sure whether he's going to show up with him because he was ordered to produce him dead or alive. We sort of have this culture around these particular cases when we talk about high-ranking officials, whether it's in the security sector or government, where it almost feels there's a gap somewhere or there are bottlenecks somewhere. So you have filed a petition, you've enjoined others in the petition. Do you feel that Kenya's legal aid system, as it were, is functional, or it's just merely symbolic? It's just there so that there's a process, the wheels of justice are spinning, and it appears there's something happening, but there is no end to it. Doesn't produce the results that are desired.
To the human eye, when things are happening at that moment, you can't see the results, and it feels bleak. For instance, what I'm saying is like, if you look even pre-colonialism or before we got independence, when the Mau Mau were fighting, they didn't have firearms, they were less, they were being killed, and it did seem like they would be successful to fight for independence. And at that moment, someone would look at it and wonder, why are they still fighting? Let them just go back home and stop fighting. But at the end of the day, Kenya got independence. Post-independence, even during the regimes, the Moi and Kenyatta regimes, at that moment, there were still people still pushing and fighting for progressive laws, respect for human rights, and the rule of law. And someone would wonder, why are you speaking out of? Why are you speaking up? There is nothing that will change, but consistently these actions add up. At the moment, you might think that this court case, there's nothing that will happen, but over time it will add up because we are seeking accountability, and these people who hold public offices, they need to be held accountable. And over time, this will still, it's one step to take these steps towards accountability. Even from the time even getting the Constitution of Kenya to 2010, it took so many years since the 1963 Constitution. That's until 2010. It was so many years. That's like over 47 years or thereabout. But over time, things do change, and I don't think we should give up and say and just raise our hands and give up and say.
No, I agree.
Yes.
I mean, there's civic responsibility. You're putting pressure and to hold those people to account. That is okay. But at the tail end of this, let's talk about the judiciary. Does it sometimes feel, and maybe Nora can also chip in, does it almost feel like there is not enough teeth to bite into this? There is evidence. Here there is evidence people have been abducted. There is clear evidence, what C.S. Murkomen said. But when it goes to court, the whole process, it almost feels like fatigue. Like, we know how this is going to end up. A case is going to be pushed. He's going to be ordered to appear in court. He won't appear. His lawyer will appear. And it almost feels like you're giving these people enough space, enough runtime, and you don't have teeth to really bite.
I wouldn't go that far. And I mean, obviously, as Katiba Institute, as an institution that works in the court so much, I'll be the last to say that there aren't issues with delays, that there aren't issues with certain, including even systemic issues with the administration of justice. That being said, I completely agree with Nelius in terms of there have been great court orders as well, right? There have been, we've spent quite a bit of time now talking about the ignoring and lacking implementation of court orders. That is because those court orders are great and they do exist. The fact that we have the petition that held, for example, the use of force to protect property is unlawful, that was something that went through the courts, and the interpretation of our constitution, many of the rights and how they are applied today are down to court orders and decisions that went through the judiciary. So as much as there are problems, and again, I acknowledge there are systemic problems as well, as much as there are problems with how the system works, I think we definitely can't say, well, it's again, that as well, it has failed or it's not working. It is working, and we do see positive developments. I think we don't always necessarily talk, when there are positive developments, we don't necessarily talk as much about the role of the judiciary in that, right? We currently are seeing a lot of the violation part of it. But that problematically, it's not, that is not in the judiciary's wheelhouse itself, right? The fact that court orders are being ignored does not mean that the court order didn't come.
But doesn't that then lead to, well, let's look at, I digress a bit, let's look at Baby Pendo's case. How many years has it been? 8 years and counting. There's another administration in place. Let's even talk about the IDP case. This is 207, 208. They are still seeking compensation. And there are cases that are filed in court. There are court orders that after today have not been obeyed. And those who are supposed to be held to account are actually even out of office. The slowness of this wheel as it spins, does it give that feeling that there's a pileup of so many cases, there is no end in sight? It's too slow.
Unfortunately, the judicial process tends to be slow. That I will have to admit. It takes so much time sometimes from the time you institute a case for it to be heard and determined and get orders. Then also there is also the process after getting the court orders of implementing now the actual court decisions. This takes time, and it's easy to get discouraged, but at the end of it all, what I have seen is courts still give these decisions at the end of it all. If you are patient enough, you will get the court order and you'll get that access to justice, or you are upholding of your rights or that were violated. That will still happen, even though it takes time. I do admit it takes time from a legal standpoint, the judicial system as it stands. And I know Kenyans always wonder what's going on. Why is my case taking so many? It's just been mentioned. It's never been heard for years. But that's now systemic issues now that about how the judiciary operates. Sometimes it's because there's backlog of cases. Other times it's because of funding and shortage of staff, shortage of judges and magistrates. So all these reasons compounded can slow down the wheels of justice. But at the end of it all, I want to believe that someone will still get that judgment, that court decision, and be able to say, I went to court and this was decided in my case.
So today today, okay.
I just wanted to add one thing on that, because I think in the question that you asked and in what you mentioned, there were a number of issues as well that actually relate to decisions to prosecute, and so that also really lie with the prosecutors. And I do think it is worth us, again, when we're talking about accountability, thinking a bit more, and I know that we don't have the time to do so now, but thinking a bit more about what is the role of the prosecutor in lacking accountability. What are we seeing in terms of who does get prosecuted for things and who doesn't, right? You touched on that earlier. So I think that is an important piece to this.
So there is the aspect of whatever it is we're discussing today, and there is the need to bring justice. So there is disrespect of court orders. There is also the failure to implement the same. So are we looking at pursuing these individuals beyond their time in office? Because one would say, I'm in government, there's nothing that will be done today. But after the fact, are we looking at pursuing them so that justice is found even when they are not being protected by the system? Yes.
Yeah, I think on a case-by-case basis, of course, I think, there have been important rulings around individual responsibility that goes beyond the office that you hold. And so in certain cases, that is the appropriate measure to take. I think in other instances, it really is about what actions are you taking in exercising your office. So I think it's not impossible, but it is a case-by-case decision.
So what happens next? Here we are. It come out officially yesterday. What happens next in terms of this challenge and the petition, and how the process will run?
The court process, as I've said, it takes time. So right now we are just awaiting directions on the petition, which date it will come, are there responses. The court will give directions towards the respondent, now the cabinet secretary filing a response. And there were conservatory orders we had sought if the court will indulge us and issue them. And so
what are those?
Yes, we had made an application for in the interim to get perhaps Nora can assist me, but there was we had made in when filing a petition, sometimes you do file a petition and also get it so that it's certified urgent, and then also at the same time is one moment. I'm looking for the specific prayers that we sought in the application. The ones that we were seeking in the interim was that it be certified urgent, the matter be certified urgent, and that pending the hearing and determination of the application, that the cabinet secretary issues a public written statement to be published in a nationwide newspaper and also to be aired on national TV, that him retracting his comments and also giving reference to how use of force can be used in which instances, and also pending the determination of the application. This is what the orders we wanted before even the petition itself is heard, that he should already retract these statements and these comments that he made. So that's what we are waiting for at the moment, because we just filed it. But once that's out, if there are any orders, we'll be happy to share them with the media, and any developments, we'll be happy to share them with you. Yes.
Nora?
Yeah, I mean, as Nelius says, we're waiting essentially. Obviously, it will be great if the court issues interim orders as we wait. But essentially, ultimately, we hope that the petition will be dealt with urgently. We've talked a lot again about the delays in the system.
Njuguna is the legal advisor, Kenya Human Rights Commission, and Nora Mbagathi, executive director of the Katiba Institute. We had this conversation this morning, and we thank you both for being here, and we look forward to more.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.